just walking my dog, singing my song, strolling along. It's just me and my dog, catching some sun. We can't go wrong. 'Cause I don't care about your hate and your doubt, and I don't care what the politicians spout. If you need a companion, why just go out by the pound and find yourself.
Hi, I'm Mary Catalano. Welcome to Rescue Roundtable. We have a guest that we've had before just recently come back, and he's got some more wonderful information for us, and we're very excited about him coming here today. He is the founder of the No Kill Advocacy Center. That's No Kill, which we've all been praying for. Please welcome Nathan Winograd.
Thank you.
And Nathan has not only come up with this no kill solution, he has written a book.
Yes.
And I want to talk about, today we're going to talk about the book that you've written, which sounds very fascinating, and other things. Let's start off with the book. Thank you for coming.
I appreciate it. The book is called Redemption, The Myth of Pet Overpopulation and the No-Kill Revolution in America. And it really tells the history of animal sheltering in the United States, how the movement started, what the founders' original vision was for SPCAs and humane societies and shelters around the country, how we lost our way, and ended up being these shelters that were founded on the highest ideals of compassion and life-saving became the leading killers of dogs and cats in the United States. And then more recently, the no-kill movement, which says we can and we must stop the killing. And so I tell that entire story from the first SPCA founded in the United States to the advent of no-kill more recently.
Great. And when is it coming out?
It's coming out, actually, the publication date, to the date it becomes available to the public, is April 1st of 2007. And I specifically chose that date because it's the 13th anniversary of when San Francisco officially stopped killing healthy dogs and cats.
13 years.
13 years.
That's wonderful.
It's wonderful, but there's also a downside to that. It has been 13 years since we, as our generation of activists and animal lovers, figured out how to end the killing of dogs and cats in shelters. It's been 13 years, and you would think that in those 13 years, communities around the country would have followed San Francisco's lead,
right,
and we would be a no-kill nation today. But sadly, except for a handful of other communities, San Francisco still remains an aberration. And
would you just quickly go over the solutions? And we were discussing something else about the reasons that it hasn't been implemented because of the staff or
well, for the first time in the United States, the leaders, the self-proclaimed leaders of the large national animal protection movements, the Humane Society of the United States, the American Humane Association, the ASPCA in New York City, they met in Chicago, for example, in 1974. And that was the first great meeting of these animal welfare leaders. And the purpose of that meeting was to figure out why shelters are killing so many animals. Mm-hmm. But the meeting, which started with lofty ideals, quickly deteriorated to basically looking for a scapegoat for the killing, even though shelters were killing most of the animals coming through there. And even though a lot of their own practices were resulted in a higher than quote-unquote necessary death rate, they nonetheless decided that they had no culpability whatsoever for the death rate. At the time, you had shelters saying, people won't adopt out older animals. So if they're 4 years old or 5 years old, they have to be. I mean, they literally said they must be put down. They also, as a group, decided that all kittens and puppies under the age of 6 weeks would be killed as a matter of policy. And they decided that shelters shouldn't work with rescue groups, that if a shelter had an animal, sending the animal to rescue would stress the animal too much, even though that the alternative was death. They ignored their own culpability in the killing, and they decided that two groups were responsible for the high rates of shelter killing. The first group was the animals themselves.
Of course.
They said that if they weren't young enough, if they weren't friendly enough, if they bonded too strongly to the family that surrendered them, they had to be killed.
Oh my God.
And so in one fell swoop, they surmised that shelters had a moral responsibility to kill 60% of the animals in their care. That's the one group. And of course, the other group they came up with that was responsible was the quote-unquote irresponsible public, the people that allowed their animals to do bad things. And unfortunately, they also thought they had an answer to that problem. And the answer to that problem was something that they nicknamed LESS, LES, which stands for Legislation, Education, and Sterilization. And so legislation, the first prong of their response was to pass a whole series of laws to curtail the public's bad behavior and the bad behavior of their animals. So that's really at a time when you start seeing in the United States this concept of pet limit laws, that nobody can have more than 3 or 4 animals, which of course all that did was limit the number of homes that were potentially available. You couldn't feed stray animals. So if you were feeding a cat that came to your door, an animal control officer could issue you a citation because by feeding the cat, you were the animal's owner, and you were allowing the animal to be outside in violation of the no outside, no free roaming animal. You weren't allowing anything other than a hungry animal to have occasional food. And what unfortunately ended up happening was that those laws, it empowered animal control to impound even more animals.
Right.
And of course they were saying that they had no choice but to kill the animals that they were taking in, so all it did was lead to increases in death rate. But more than that, it set the shelter up as adversaries with the very people that they needed to embrace in order to save lives. So if I'm feeding stray cats, I'm the very person shelter should seek out and partner with, because I'm going to support them in terms of rescue. I'm going to support them in terms of donations. I'm going to support them in terms of adoption. But they basically said that I was the enemy, so to speak. And that's the model we've been living with for the last 30 years. And of course, despite all these laws, none of the communities that have passed all these laws have actually achieved no-kill success. The paradigm, the no-kill paradigm really shifted the landscape in 1994 when San Francisco became the first city in the United States to end the killing of healthy homeless dogs and cats in its shelters. And it didn't do that by passing laws. It didn't do that by punishing the public. It did it by changing its own behavior, by staying open later so that working people can come to the shelter and either look for their lost pets or adopt new ones. It created an off-site adoption program because, like most shelters, the shelter was located in the city's Mission District, sandwiched between a cement factory and a trucking operation in a part of the city known as the Industrial Protection Zone.
How lovely.
Right. So if you wanted to adopt a dog, you could go to your local pet store, or you can drive clear across the city to the shelter in the middle of nowhere to adopt. And
or take the bus in San Francisco.
Which one are you going to do?
Right.
And so San Francisco decided that rather than wait for people to come to the shelter, they were going to take the shelter to them. They started a feral cat TNR program. They started high-volume, low-cost sterilization. They started allowing volunteers and rescue groups to help in the life-saving endeavor, and that had tremendous success. And for the first time, what every national organization said was impossible, what 150 years of sheltering said was not practical. A city ended the killing of healthy homeless dogs and cats, and this movement, the no-kill movement, started to kind of spread across the country, the desire for no-kill, at least. That model I took from San Francisco to Tompkins County, and I like to say I gently placed it into rural America, but basically smashed it over their head. And also had tremendous success. In fact, very, very quickly achieved a no-kill community, so that the only animals killed in the animal control shelter there were irremediably suffering animals, animals who were hopelessly ill, and in a very small percentage of cases, truly vicious dogs, less than 7% of the dogs that came through the shelter. We were saving 93% of all the cats and 93% of all the dogs.
That's unbelievable.
That model has now spread to other parts of the country, like Charlottesville, Virginia, like Richmond, Virginia, like Fulton County, basically Atlanta, Georgia, Ivan City, Utah, and other places who are mimicking that model and also achieving achieving no-kill success. That is the story, and if there's a central message in that, is that we are the generation that questioned the killing. We are the generation that figured out how to stop the killing. Of course, the next question is, will we be the generation that does? And the only answer, if the answer is going to be yes, we've got to follow the model that works. We've got to embrace fully the no-kill philosophy and abandon this notion that the enemy, the reason shelters kill, is anyone other than the shelter's fault, and stop seeking more and more laws to punish the public when the reason shelters are killing so many animals is because they're failing to put in place the programs that are necessary to stop the killing. And at the core of that is this entirely false belief in pet overpopulation.
Now explain that, because that's trouble.
Well, I mean, just because we believe something doesn't make it so. And the reason we believe pet overpopulation is real is because we've been told it's real for as long as any of us can remember. And it basically comes down to something like this. Shelters take in animals, a lot more animals than they save.
That's right.
So, quote unquote, shelters take in a lot of animals. They save very few animals. Hence, there must be more animals than there are homes. And we believe that. But there are a lot of reasons. In fact, all the evidence says that is not true. The first reason why we know it's not true is because of something that people who go to shelters regularly see every day. Now, most people wouldn't see this because they don't go to shelters every day. But shelter workers go to shelters every day, animal rescuers go to shelters every day, and what they see are empty cages. Shelters in the United States continue to kill dogs and cats despite empty cages. When I started helping the Philadelphia shelter, on one February day, I counted 70 empty cat cages at a time the shelter was killing cats for space, and I say that in quotes. And that's the reality in shelters all across the country. But that's not the only reason. If you actually look at the number of animals that are currently in homes, and you look at the number of animals that become available every year, either because a dog died of old age, a cat ran away, or people who are looking to acquire cats, all the data points in the same direction, that every year in the United States, there are twice as many homes opening up for dogs, people who want to bring another dog or a dog into their home, than there are dogs entering shelters. And there's more homes opening up for cats than there are cats entering shelters. So in theory, we could replace all population control killing today if we did a better job of getting those animals into those homes. The problem isn't that there are too many animals and not enough homes. The problem is shelters are just plain lousy at adoptions. They're doing a very poor job of getting those animals into those homes. And the reasons for that are something, if you go into a shelter every day, you see it. And that is disrespectful staff, poor customer service, lousy hours that don't give working people and families with children in school an opportunity to visit the shelter, a shelter in a remote location, no off-site adoption, lack of good information, lack of public relations, lack of good marketing, all those things. And if we just did a better job at that and increased market share, we would end the killing of dogs and cats. And that's not just me telling you. That's what happened in San Francisco. That's what happened in Tompkins County. That's what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. That's what happened in Ivan City, Utah. That's what is increasingly happening in places like Richmond, Virginia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Fulton County, Georgia. All, those are shelters and communities, some in the north, some in the south, some in the east, some in the west. Some are rural, some are urban, some are as small, have human populations of 3,000. Some are huge, having human populations near 1.5 million people. And all are achieving tremendous success by healing themselves, changing the shelter, rather than trying to blame the public for their own failures.
How do you get the shelter? Now I've seen the shelter staff. I know what they're like, and they're in the union. They've been there for a long time. It's a job to them. how can their attitude change? It's got to come from the people above, right?
Well, it's got to come from the leader.
Yeah.
But the first thing we have to remember is that the shelter belongs to us. We are the taxpayers, and they are stewards of dogs and cats on our behalf. And as community citizens, if government is if government practices aren't what we like, we should be storming the city council chambers and making demands. But simply saying stop the killing, although an important rallying cry, doesn't tell city council what it needs to do to stop the killing. And that's where we get into all the programs and services like TNR, foster care, that made cities like San Francisco and Tompkins County and Charlottesville so successful. But the most important thing is to get the right person running the animal control shelter. And let me give you an example, because I think Philadelphia is really key here to understanding how a shelter can go from what one reporter called a mismanaged house of horrors, in fact calling it Abu Ghraib for animals, to what is now increasingly a shining light for other parts of the country. This Philadelphia is a strong union city. Every employee at Philadelphia Animal Control is represented by the AFL-CIO, a very strong union. And yet, a new shelter, and keep in mind, this is an agency that had never, in its history, ever fired an employee for any reason. Nobody ever got fired there.
God.
The staff were related by marriage. There were husbands supervising wives, wives supervising cousins. Even one of the animal control officers whose kids became of school age hired his babysitter to be another animal control officer because since his kids were now in school, she was out of a job. So she got a job. The union boss was hiring relatives. I mean, this was really what they called the wolf pack. It was, almost incestuous, the relationships. And there was an attitude that poor performance would go unpunished, and particularly because they felt the union would protect them. So one of the things that the city did was hire an outsider, someone who had a passion for saving lives and was not tied into the animal control mentality, had never run a shelter, had run organizations and knew how to run a company, knew about goal setting, knew about staff management and about budgeting, and came in and literally said, we are going to change the way we operate. Here are the programs and services that were successful in San Francisco. We're going to start doing it. We're going to be courteous to the people that come in. We're going to be doing our jobs. We are going to respond to all animal control calls, and people who don't do it will be disciplined and fired. And within the first 6 months, half the staff was replaced.
Really?
In a very strong union environment. When I hear people...
Because the person in charge does have the power to fire them, is that correct?
Absolutely, regardless of what the union relationship is. As long as
that'd be a dream come
there's
true.
Documentation and there's policies. The problem is there were no written policies. So how do you hold a staff member accountable to a policy that's not in writing, particularly when they're supervised by family members?
Right.
So a union has special challenges, but it's not insurmountable, and it really depends on the will of its leader.
So did they write the policies out?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And then train staff. And that's not to say that all staff at shelters don't care about the animals.
That's not.
The problem is that if shelters are underperforming and those people aren't being punished, then good people leave because they can't stomach it.
Right.
Because they're, one of the things that at the time I got there, they had what they call an E-room, the euthanasia room. It was where they killed the animals in shifts, 24-hour shifts, around the clock, 7 days a week. And these guys, their job was literally, the people would, literally you could see them lining up outside the door, bringing the animals, they'd kill them, they'd move them to what they called the morgue, and then they'd take them to the landfill. They closed that room. And now they have vet techs who primarily treat animals and do, unfortunately they're still killing animals, but they're saving 70% of the dogs and 60% of the cats, whereas at the time they were killing 90% of all the animals coming through the door. But that was their job. And one of the guys was telling me that there were times he just simply could not take it anymore, because he would see these dogs, he would see these people in the hallways socializing when people wanting to adopt animals were waiting for help. He would watch employees not answering the phones, potentially people wanting to adopt animals, and then yet they were bringing the animals to him. He finally ended up quitting while I was there. Couldn't take it anymore, even though I kind of promised him there was a light at the end of the tunnel. He had heard it before and had enough. Had he stayed, what he would have discovered is now an altogether different type of shelter, one where animals find hope and a second chance, as opposed to what they find in most shelters around the country, which is the end of the line.
Right.
And so it's infinitely doable, and it's happened in many communities. San Francisco was the first to end the killing of healthy animals. Tompkins was the first to actually create a no-kill community. But if activists focus their efforts on regime change at the top, and implementing those programs and services, it doesn't matter how large or how small the community is, whether it's urban or rural, whether it's in the north or the south, a blue state or a red state. I mean, I have gone to the reddest parts of the reddest states, some of the most conservative places in the United States, and to hear them talk about their dogs and cats. Ivan City, Utah, for example, is in southern Utah. I don't think if you were a member of the Democratic Party, you could even go to Utah. And they're saving 97% of all the animals coming through the shelter, because they are committed to saving these creatures, because they love their dogs and cats as much as people in upstate New York do, where they're saving 93% of all the dogs and cats. So, and then you look at places like San Francisco, which is one of the most ethnically and culturally diverse cities in the country. And what that shows, and what the no-kill movement shows, and what the cities that achieve success show, is that yes, there is public irresponsibility. That's why shelters exist in the first place.
Right.
But that there's enough compassion and enough love for dogs and cats in the community to overcome that public irresponsibility, and that people of all walks of life can help build a better world for animals. So ultimately, the book is a positive story. It shows where we've gone wrong, how we have failed the animals, how many communities are still failing the animals, but it provides a path to no-kill. And my hope is that it helps communities cross the threshold from where they can't go back, where they're no longer listening to the excuses of that it's the public's fault that we as a shelter are killing so many animals, because the book, I think, unassailably proves that, in fact, the reason so many animals are dying in shelters is because people in shelters are killing them, and for no other reason.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen everything you're talking about with the empty cages and the staff, and it's devastating. It's so devastating to live it. It's devastating to. I used to be in the pound every day, and I can't do it anymore. But there have been some changes, but it's still not where it needs to be, and people they're not getting it.
And one of the great myths that and this I think is also demonstrated in the book, is one of the great myths is this notion that we should wait, that change takes time, that if that we are committed to saving the lives of dogs and cats, but it's going to take 5 years or 10 years. And so it's become vogue now to hear, and what I like...
It's a very political...
Yeah, but what I say in the book is that while the desire for no-kill is spreading like wildfire, the actual implementation of no-kill, unfortunately, is not. And what you have now is a third way of doing business. At first, when San Francisco first achieved success by saving all healthy, the first set of animals, the response was, it's a lie. They're lying to you. When they couldn't continue that game because the proof was unassailable, then it became, well, it can only happen in San Francisco. It can't happen here because that's urban or rural.
Right.
The
Whatever
whole
the
state.
excuse is.
Right, whatever the excuse was. As Tompkins and Charlottesville and more communities become successful, those excuses go away. Now what you're hearing is we're going to be no-kill too. Now, they say it, and they might have a token level foster care program, or they might not. I mean, if you look at San Antonio, Texas, it recently announced a couple months ago that it was going to be no-kill by 2012. 2 weeks later, front page of the paper, they're talking about how they're doing sweeps for cats to get them off the streets, bring them into the shelter and kill them, and how they're going to increase their enforcement by citing people who feed even though they spay, neuter feral cats.
Oh
and
my
so
God.
it's now, there's a third way of doing business, which is tell people what they want to hear.
Right.
We are going to be no-kill in 5 years
Right.
or 10 years. But meanwhile, there's not
my
full
God.
and rigorous implementation of all those programs and services necessary. Because if they did that, Charlottesville, Virginia didn't go from killing most of the animals to saving 90% in 5 years or 10 years. They did it in a year. Tompkins County did it virtually overnight.
So what do people need to do? We're running out of time. What do you recommend that people do that are interested in making this happen?
Well,
What they can do as a person, as a group, as a community, what can they do?
if I can refer them to my website, on our website of the No Kill Advocacy Center is a document called Reforming Animal Control. It is a step-by-step guide. They can just click on the resource library and download it. It lists the 10 programs of the No Kill equation. We've only hit on a couple of them. I mean, each one is a program unto itself on your show, but and it shows you how you advocate for change, who you write the letters to, what meetings you need to attend, what you should be demanding, and when all else fails, how to get the animal control director gone and someone, and I'm not saying this for the city of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles, I'm saying anywhere in the country. It will outline the programs and services you should be demanding of your local shelter. It outlines how you hold them responsible, and when all else fails, how you get them fired and replaced with a truly compassionate director.
That can be done now.
That can be done now.
And we're out of time, and I want to thank you again so much. Nathan Winograd, look him up, go to the website, start a no-kill movement in your area, get it going, do it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it.